The night was thick with fog, the highway swallowed by an inky blackness, a stark contrast to the dim glow of Lucy's truck headlights. She was alone, making the long journey home from a late shift in a town that felt a world away. The air, heavy with the scent of wet earth, carried something else, something unsettling that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. As she pushed the truck through the dense mist, shadows danced at the edge of her vision, flickering just beyond the reach of her lights. She tried to dismiss them, telling herself it was just the trees, their branches twisted into monstrous shapes by the fog. But the feeling of being watched intensified with every mile. Then, she saw them. Figures, crouching low by the roadside, their forms barely discernible in the gloom. Their eyes, though, were unmistakable, glinting like animal eyes caught in a camera flash. They were watching her, waiting. A cold dread began to seep into her bones, a primal fear that tightened its grip around her chest. And just as that fear reached its peak, her truck sputtered, shuddered violently, and died. The headlights flickered once, twice, and then plunged her into near total darkness. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic thumping of her own heart. Lucy fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she swiped the screen. No signal. Of course. She let out a frustrated curse, her breath fogging up the cold glass of the windshield. Her eyes scanned the empty, menacing road, searching for any sign of life, any sliver of hope. And that's when she saw it. Set back from the road, almost hidden by the grasping trees and swirling fog, stood an old, dilapidated house. It was a skeletal silhouette against the night sky, its windows like vacant eyes. The front door hung ajar, swaying ever so slightly in a non-existent breeze, an open invitation into the darkness within. Every instinct screamed for her to stay in the truck, to lock the doors and wait for a dawn that felt impossibly far away. But the cold was already seeping in, and the thought of those figures still lurking in the woods was even more terrifying than the unknown secrets the house might hold. Fear and a desperate, morbid curiosity warred within her. With a deep, shaky breath, she pushed the truck door open, the creak echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. The short walk to the house felt like a mile, each step a conscious effort against the heavy pull of dread. As she reached the threshold and stepped inside, the air hit her, a thick, cloying miasma of damp wood, decay, and the sharp metallic tang of rusted iron. The door swung shut behind her with a definitive, soul-jarring thud. Plunged into near blackness, her eyes struggled to adjust. Moonlight, thin and pale, filtered through grimy, broken windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. And then one of those shadows moved. It detached itself from the deeper darkness in the corner, unfolding like a nightmare made real. It was tall, impossibly gaunt, its limbs long and spidery. It moved with a speed that defied logic, a fluid, terrifying grace. Before Lucy could even process what she was seeing, it was in front of her. 2 points of crimson light ignited in the darkness of its face, eyes that burned with ancient malice. For a fleeting second, she saw a glint of impossibly sharp teeth. Then it spoke. The voice wasn't a sound she heard with her ears, but one that scraped directly against her mind, like nails on a chalkboard, a symphony of pure terror. "You're searching for my blood, aren't you?" The words made no sense, yet they resonated with a chilling, absolute certainty. Lucy opened her mouth to scream, but the sound was strangled in her throat, a choked, pathetic gasp. Her training, her common sense, everything evaporated, replaced by a singular, overwhelming urge: run. She remembered the truck keys, her only hope of escape. She'd dropped them when she'd ran from the truck. She spun around, her eyes desperately scanning the floor near the doorway, but they were gone. Panic, hot and blinding, surged through her veins. The shadow glided toward her, its unnatural speed a horrifying spectacle. It didn't walk, it flowed across the floor like spilled ink. Lucy darted away, scrambling into a corner of the room, her back hitting the wall hard. Her frantic gaze fell on the floorboards at her feet. There, etched into the wood, in what looked like dried, blackened blood, were words. A chilling inscription that sealed her fate. "Who enters this house shall never leave. Blood is our ultimate sustenance." The shadow paused, as if savoring her realization, her dawning horror. And then with a final guttural hiss that seemed to emanate from the very walls, it lunged. Lucy scrambled backward, her hands slapping against the decaying walls as she tried to find a way out. The house itself seemed to conspire against her. It felt alive, a malevolent entity twisting and contorting around her. Hallways that should have been straight, now bent at impossible angles. Every door she managed to wrench open didn't lead outside, but to another dark, suffocating corridor, each one stained with more blood, each one filled with more flickering, hungry shadows. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of ghostly voices echoing the horrifying inscription, promising an eternity of darkness. Her own screams finally found voice, echoing endlessly in the labyrinthine nightmare of the house, a house that had been waiting patiently for its next meal.
She didn't know what it was at first, just a faint noise, a scratching sound from somewhere deep within the old abandoned house. Lucy held her breath, flashlight beam cutting through the thick, dusty air. The floorboards groaned under her feet with every hesitant step. The stories about this place, the whispers of it being haunted, had always seemed like just that, stories. But standing here, in the suffocating silence, a chill snaked its way up her spine. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't an animal. It sounded intentional, like nails dragging slowly, deliberately down a wooden plank. Then she heard it. The scraping of claws against the walls, the whisper of dry, cracked lips repeating her name. Lucy. It was a sound like rustling dead leaves, a dry, malevolent hiss that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive quiet. Her flashlight flickered, the beam dancing erratically across the peeling wallpaper. In those flashing moments of light, she saw them. Not one pair of eyes, but dozens, glowing with a faint, predatory light from the dark corners of the room. They blinked in unison, unblinking, unfeeling. Pale, skeletal hands began to emerge from the walls themselves, the plaster cracking and crumbling as they pushed their way through. Fingers, long and emaciated, stretched and clawed at the air, dragging grotesque, shadowy forms behind them. They moved with a jerky, unnatural motion, pulling themselves into the room, their eyes fixed on her. Lucy's breath hitched in her throat, a strangled gasp. This was no ordinary creature, no simple ghost. A cold dread, colder than the grave, settled in her stomach. She knew now, with a terrifying certainty, what she was facing. This was a Neuroro Pishak, a demonic predator from the darkest corners of forgotten lore. It fed on fear, it drank blood, and it delighted in the suffering of its victims. This creature wasn't just a physical threat. It could warp reality, twist the very fabric of her surroundings, and play with her mind until she couldn't tell what was real and what was a hallucination born of sheer terror. It made escape impossible, turning every hallway into a labyrinth, every door into a dead end. Panic seized her, a tidal wave of pure, primal fear. She had to move, she had to run. With a final desperate push, fueled by adrenaline, she lunged for a doorway she hadn't noticed before. A dark opening that led to a stairwell descending into the basement. The air grew colder with each step she took down into the darkness, a biting, damp cold that seeped into her bones. The whispers followed her, slithering down the stairs behind her, always just a few steps away. The shadow, the one that had been a vague shape in the room above, now followed her, silent and menacing. It didn't need to make a sound. She could feel its presence, a weight on the air, a suffocating pressure that made it hard to breathe. She finally reached the bottom, her feet landing on a cold stone floor. The basement was a cavernous, sprawling room much larger than the house above should have allowed. The walls weren't just damp, they were dripping with a thick, dark liquid, fresh blood. It ran in rivulets down the stone, pooling on the floor in dark, glistening puddles. And all around the perimeter of the room, etched in what looked like blackened tar, were ritual symbols. Strange, angular sigils she had never seen before, radiating an aura of ancient evil.
Sharp, jutting pieces of bone and a mouth filled with jagged, needle-like teeth. It had no definite shape, yet it was undeniably solid, a being of pure malevolence given form. Its many red eyes burned with a hungry fire. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed in her mind, not through her ears. Your fear, your blood, it will sustain me. In that moment, a strange clarity cut through her terror. Running was useless, hiding was pointless. The house itself was its domain. The only way out was through. Summoning a sliver of courage she didn't know she possessed, Lucy grabbed a broken piece of wood from a pile of debris, its end splintered into a sharp point. She screamed, a raw, defiant sound, and swung blindly at the monstrous shape. The shadow recoiled with a shriek, a sound that was both high-pitched and guttural. A sound that scraped against her soul and promised to haunt her waking moments and her dreams forever. For a split second, she thought she had heard it. She thought she had a chance. But the house was alive, and it was on the creature's side. Doors she hadn't seen before slammed shut with cannon-like booms. The few grimy windows high on the basement walls shattered inward, showering the floor with glass. And the shadow, it didn't retreat. It multiplied. Its burning red eyes began appearing everywhere, on the walls, on the ceiling, in the puddles of blood on the floor. Dozens of them, then hundreds, all staring at her, a constellation of hatred. The single entity had become a legion. Lucy ran. She ran without direction, without thought, her only instinct to put distance between herself and the horrors that surrounded her. She stumbled over rubble, her ankle twisting, sending a sharp pain up her leg. She screamed as her world dissolved into a swirling vortex of darkness, red eyes, and the sound of her own frantic heartbeat. She burst through a door, falling onto damp earth, the night air cold on her tear-streaked face. She was outside. She had escaped. She scrambled to her feet and ran, not daring to look back, the sounds of the house fading behind her. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, collapsing in a heap in the middle of a deserted road. Silence. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was only the sound of her own ragged breathing. She had made it. She was safe. And just as that wave of relief washed over her, just as she thought she'd finally escaped the nightmare, she felt it. cold, skeletal fingers wrapping slowly, deliberately around her neck. A whisper right in her ear, the same dry, rustling voice from the house. You never leave the shadow of blood. The last thing Lucy saw as the world went dark were two glowing red eyes, inches from her own, filled with an ancient, triumphant hunger. And then nothing.